I remember when my leader, when I first started working there and just realized how all this hurt he'd come through from the past 2 years, he had gone to another national leader and just saying, I don't know what to do. I think I'm going to lose the church. And this other leader said to him, here's what you need to do. You need to go back and you need to get ready for your sermon this Sunday and you need to preach and you just need to keep putting one step in front of another and live with integrity and do the next right thing. And eventually you'll rebuild your trust. Some of those people, not all, some of them will come back and say, man, I had it all wrong. I'm sorry. And it might take 6 months and it might take 6 years, but you will be fine.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the Leading Smart podcast, season 3, Leading in Real Time. Tim just said, I don't know what you had for breakfast today, Holly, but it must have been good. And I said, nothing, which is probably the problem. I got lots of energy at 9:26 a.m. Central Time on a
That
Monday morning.
probably means you're going to crash in hopefully after this podcast is done recording.
No, I need some longevity because this afternoon we have our XP virtual cohort that I
That's
got to.
true.
So, yeah.
Monthly cohort. Yeah. Put in a,
Monthly cohort. Join us if you haven't already. We love it.
yep.
It's so fun. I look forward to it every single month. All right. Today, we are going to talk about the 4 types of crises. I think it's crises that we see churches face. And often, when a church is in crisis, it's easy to feel like, because I think this is human nature, when there's a stressor or a crisis that we're facing, it feels like everything's on fire. It's like the world is ending, everything's horrible, it's all imploding. And so what we've done here is go, okay, let's pause, back up a second, and try to bucket the different types of crises that we walk with churches in so that we can have a little bit of, just some framing to identify what really is the heart of the crisis that we're facing so that we can pinpoint that and try to work towards healing in that before it snowballs and we end up with all 4 of these crises happening
Yeah.
together. So,
Which I've
Tim,
been there. So yes, we don't want that.
yeah. Well, so we were actually talking on the phone last week and you were like, I just had a light bulb moment about my first XP role and what I stepped into there. And so, Tim, I'd love for you, because you've led through crisis. Not only you've consulted with, man, thousands of churches at this point that are going through some sort of crises, but you have led internally as an XP through crisis. So can you kind of walk us through those different milestones in your journey?
It was interesting. I was telling someone, or I've often utilized my story from Willow and talked about it as I'm so glad I was able to be there during that season and to be able to kind of, lend some help to a difficult season because up until then, everything I'd been involved in was up and to the right. And that was the first kind of like turnaround kind of situation. And then I remembered like my brain went back um 31 years to when I started at Granger and I completely kind of, I don't know if repressed or what, I just hadn't talked about it in so long. So when I first went to Granger, we first started attending this church that was in a movie theater, just a brand new church plant, United Methodist Church plant. And I had friends that were like, oh, you got to come see this. And I'm like, I've been to 800 different churches at this point. I was 25 and literally 800 different churches in the ministry I was working at. And so I'm like, how different can this be? So started going, fell in love with it. It was great. Didn't know that behind the scenes, there was this horrible internal, we referred to it for decades as the train wreck, which was this crisis that was happening where all of the elders except one quit in mass, and all of the staff except one, and he was a new guy. His name was Rob Wegner. He'd only been there a few months, just gotten married, so he didn't know enough to leave. So he was the only one that stayed with the senior pastor. Everyone else had quit, and this little church was in turmoil. I didn't know that was happening at all, happening right as I was attending and falling in love with this church, but came on staff not long after that, and then kind of just had to help rebuild because the church had dropped from about 400 to under 200 by the time I got there. Lost over half the people, which, with a small church plant, that's very precarious.
Yeah. Seriously. That's so interesting because, yeah, there are so many parallels with your Willow story, but decades before. So, well, that's what we're going to talk about today is unpacking 4 different types of crisis so that whether you're in crisis right now and you feel like you're at the bottom of the barrel and you don't see a way out, or you are in a really healthy place that there's going to be moments where it won't be as wonderful as where you're in right now. And so to give you language that you and your team can use to kind of go, okay, where really are we and how do we get ahead of that and get healthy out of this crisis? So the first one, Tim, is what you experienced at Willow, which is character crisis. And so this is the fall of the senior leader, whether there was, an affair or a scandal or embezzlement. I mean, we've seen anything and everything. And these are the things that typically we see in the news. And so this is where you can tend to think, oh, this is the number one crisis that happens. It's just the ones that these are the news stories that we see. So, talk to us more about character crisis, Tim, and what that looks like and how we can identify it in if we're in that second chair leader spot.
And that's probably the one that we're most familiar with, because it is the
Mhm.
one that makes the front headlines, either of the local newspaper, in Willow's case, national newspapers. In these days, the front page, and there's bloggers out there that live for clickbait on the biggest crisis that's going on at any given church, any given organization, and so you see it there. So I think that's the hard one, because most of the time you've got people attending that church that I mean, just like me when I first went to Granger. I mean, they just love the church, and their kids got baptized there and they got married there, and then suddenly this news comes out of something that's happening with a leader that they put on a pedestal, in so many ways, unfairly for that leader, but it's the nature of the beast of someone who's in the spotlight, and you put them on a pedestal, and then suddenly something comes out, and then you don't know, is it true, is it false, and then you just get frustrated and you get cynical and you get skeptical, and then you think there's a cover up. It's just, and there could be a cover up, and oftentimes organizations tend to band together and kind of like, okay, we got to protect the organization, not realizing they have a PR nightmare and a trust failure on their hands as well, in addition to just that one leader who fell. So that's tough coming into an organization like that that's gone through that. And if you've been at a church that's gone through that, it's so disappointing. It just can, in some cases, sideline your faith for a season.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot, and we've worked with several churches that either are going through this or have gone through this, and it's often a several year process to recover from a character crisis. Okay, our second one is related to senior leadership, but it's not necessarily a character crisis. And this is what we're calling a credibility crisis. So, this is where, and we're going to unpack how we get here in a minute, but this is where there's a loss of unity or trust in either the senior leader or the senior leadership team internally. And so that's what we're calling a credibility crisis. So, Tim, tell us more about this one.
Yeah, and credibility crisis doesn't mean that the leader didn't do anything wrong. It just means it's not something that's disqualifying, but something happens. They make a decision people don't like. The gossip firestorm starts on the internet. People who have, former employees or former elders or former church members that be or weren't happy with a decision that was made a year ago or 5 years ago begin to pile on. And pretty soon you have this mess of information. And often the church is trying to take the high road. So they're saying nothing. And then in the absence of information, people just believe what they hear, believe what they read online, and they begin to, a narrative begins to build. And then you're working against it, because then it looks like it's a cover up. It's too little too late. And when I've talked to leaders that have been in that situation, and arguably that was the situation at Granger when I first got there, the leader had not done anything wrong. There were so many accusations of things, and I stayed with that leader for 20 years. I would have seen it if it were true. But just this gossip storm had started, and people continued to pile on, and kind of, through your own baggage, your own lens, whatever you want to call it, you begin to make some assumptions and believe the worst instead of believing the best. And when I've talked to leaders going through that, they'll acknowledge, like, yeah, man, I didn't respond to that right. Or, yeah, there was that one time that I probably got a little snippy in that conversation. Man, I got super defensive when this first came up. Or I replied on a social media post that I shouldn't have replied. So they'll own pieces of it, or people around them will help them see, yeah, there's a kernel of truth here. What you can learn from this. And that credibility crisis that erodes the trust just gets out of hand. I remember when my leader, when I first started working there and just realized how all this hurt he'd come through from the past 2 years. He had gone to another national leader and just kind of broke down crying and just saying, I don't know what to do. I think I'm gonna lose the church. And this other leader said to him, here's what you need to do. You need to go back and you need to get ready for your sermon this Sunday, and you need to preach, and you just need to keep putting one step in front of another and live with integrity and do the next right thing. And eventually you'll rebuild your trust. Some of those people, not all, some of them will come back and say, man, I had it all wrong. I'm sorry. And it might take 6 months and it might take 6 years, but you will be fine.
Yeah. And if you have not listened to the episode before this one, we unpack what Tim just said there a second ago around, what we said last week was when clarity lacks, negativity fills the void. And that's what I see really being like the problem that leads to a credibility crisis. I don't know about you, Tim, but I see this too, where we've talked before on the podcast about migrating from the basketball team to the football team. And I see credibility crises happen because of that growth, like the basketball to football, because in basketball, the team is so close. You have frontline leaders who are involved in every decision. They were in every meeting. They feel like they had access to all the information. And then naturally, as the organization grows, there's layers of leadership that, happen. And so then your frontline leaders feel like I'm left out or they're keeping something from me. And you're not, but you haven't led with communication and transparency through that process and brought people along for the journey. And so there's hurt or resentment that happens that leads to a credibility crisis because we haven't been intentional through that growth process from the basketball team to the football team. And I see that over and over and over and over again. I was just on a call with a leader right before this where I was encouraging this leader to think about how do you want this broader, which was a very large, it was like 100 people, this broader department, to experience you. And he was having trouble understanding why he should be in front of all 100 people. He's like, but isn't it up to like the managers and the leaders of those teams to like lead that? I'm like, yes, to manage those teams, but for you to be the one to cast vision and show this team that they're a part of something bigger than just their day to day. And I think it's easy for us as leaders to forget that as our organizations grow, but it's so important so we can avoid these credibility crises that you and I are often called in to help fix.
Yeah, and
So communication is key.
it's so key, and often, talking to leaders just in the past few weeks, the reason we don't communicate is because we tell ourselves, "This is pretty contained. There's only, you know, 10%, 20% of our people that are really talking about this or that even are aware of it." And we don't want, we have newcomers coming, we have guests coming every single week. We don't wanna stand up and make an announcement, and then they're like, "Oh, what's going on? I didn't know that was happening." And then they, double tap on it, and then they're kind of pulled into it. And so that's what we tell ourselves, but hindsight's beautiful because we get a few weeks or months down the road and then we're like, oh, we should have started talking about this 6 weeks ago. So don't beat yourself up. If Just start where you're at and start with good communication now. Figure out what the right place is, the right amount of information to say, and don't say what you don't know. I mean, you just speak to what you do know and just rebuild the trust and do the next right thing and keep moving on as a local church. And if you do have if your credibility crisis seems like it's credibility, but then you find out it's character, then address that. Like you've got to address that and make the decisions you need to make to if people have disqualified themselves as you uncover what's happening there.
Yeah. All right. Our third one is a bit more black and white.
Yeah.
A cash crisis.
Yeah.
So this would be when we're behind on budget, we have a shortfall. This is where we've talked about this a few episodes ago, having to go through layoffs or navigate having to make big, significant budget cuts. This one's hard because you and I are in conversations like this all the time. It's, man, our cash is telling us a story that's leading us to make really hard decisions, but we really don't want to have those hard conversations, or we feel like a failure because we know that there are families that are going to be the receiver of this hard news or these hard decisions. So you've had to lead through cash crisis. That was part of Willow's story, Tim. So walk us through what this looks like.
Yeah, and we did that at Granger as well. We talked about on our episode
Oh yeah.
several weeks ago. But and I was talking to a church after that episode from Pittsburgh, a couple executive pastor and a lead pastor, and they were talking about they're kind of in that, and they said it was so helpful to hear that podcast because it kind of normalized it. Oh, okay, other churches have had to face this, and it's like absolutely. A budget is a guideline, and so you set up this guideline, and then you find you're not meeting it, and then you like you pull on your belt strap and you make some expense, and then you realize, oh wow, this is bigger than we thought, and the only way we're going to write this is to do some layoffs, to do some significant. We have to close. Maybe you have to close a campus, or you have to stop a ministry, or you have to something like that. And that's hard and it's significant. It's probably the easiest one to manage through, honestly, from a PR standpoint, a communication standpoint. Most of our folks have been on the bad end of that, or they've been on the leadership end of that, where they've had to make hard decisions, or they've been and they realize, okay, that's just part of life. And if you've been alive for very long, you know that every 8, 10, 12, 15 years, there's going to be some kind of a national economic downturn that's going to affect us in our church, because people would like to think they all give even during, difficult times, but their giving is going to lapse during those seasons.
Absolutely. And then the fourth one is a cultural crisis. And this could be where there's a national or a global or even a local crisis that impacts us culturally. So I think back to 2020 where and I feel like here we are 6 years later and it feels similar where it's just like one thing after another. We had the pandemic, then we had George Floyd's murder, and then I mean, it's just like the list goes on and on and on and on about these big, impactful situations that happened that we have to respond to. I think recently we had the Charlie Kirk situation where you and I were on calls with church leaders that felt like it was like, man, I said something and I got in trouble and I didn't say something and I got in trouble, and it was like
Right.
it felt like there's no winning. And that's how these cultural crises can feel like either way, there's no winning. So you led through this when you got to Willow. You all had not only were you going through a character crisis and a cash crisis, but you were leading through a cultural crisis as well.
Yeah, and I don't remember my first 20 years of ministry having any cultural crisis as far as affecting the unity of the church. Now, we had like 9/11, that was a cultural crisis, but it really brought Christians together. It felt like it wasn't versus, whether it was masks or vaccines, and then George Floyd, and then Charlie Kirk. I didn't call him a Christian martyr, or I didn't say he was assassinated, or I didn't mention his name at all, or I said too much. And then, so it's like, and the pastors are having to navigate this, and really, and navigate it and trying to find the right, and they're not finding it. Like, it doesn't matter what they say or don't say, like you said. So yeah, at Willow, it was really all four. It was a character crisis that got us in that situation that happened a couple years before we got there, which led to a credibility crisis, because it wasn't just the leader that failed. Now the leaders that protected the leader that failed then made the organization distrust all leadership. And that led to a culture crisis, because people vote with their feet and with their money, and people left in by the thousands and took their money by the millions. And so then we had this cash crisis. And then on top of that, we got there with COVID, and I think we were there 6 days or maybe 8 days on site when George Floyd was murdered, and then that was a crisis that we had to walk our staff through and our church through, and our city was going through, obviously, as well as the nation. But those just stockpile, and but I tell you what, at the end of the day, the solution is the same, and this sounds so easy, and it is everything but easy. It is the hardest thing in the world, is just to do the next right thing, like just to put your next step in front of the other, and you got to rebuild this thing. In some cases, it's not going to make it. Thankfully, Willow had a lot of cash reserves, and so it allowed us to absorb a significant downturn. And I know a lot of churches, back at Granger, we had a 3-week reserve. We would not have been able to absorb what Willow went through. So you just have to kind of think through that ahead of time in your planning. But obviously, none of us are planning for as big of a crisis as that was. But I think all four of those are representative of the types of crises that churches go through. And if you've been around for very long, you've probably experienced one or more of those.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Tim. Thanks for walking us through these. I'm going to do a quick recap for us. Well, you kind of you just did. You at Willow led through all four of them, but character crisis
Recap
was
the recap.
yeah, a recap to the recap. Character crisis, which is the fall of the leader, a moral failure of the leader, then a credibility crisis, which is the loss of unity or trust at the leadership level. cash crisis, and then a cultural crisis. And so, if you're finding yourself either in one of these or in several of these, or you have any questions about any of these, feel free to book a time on my calendar and we can talk through it. I do this all day, every day of talking with leaders about what they're navigating and would love to do that with you. So you can go to leadingsmart.com, click on Let's Talk, and book a time on my calendar and would love to unpack that with you.
And, and you know what's interesting? The thing that you probably won't find on our website, but we do a lot, is walking churches through these crises. We have 4 on our team right now that I think are doing that to some degree. We're coming alongside a church that finds itself in a situation they didn't plan for. They don't know what to do. You got lay people sitting on boards that have day jobs that are trying to help figure this out. A lot of times you're missing leaders at the church because of the crisis, and so it's honestly a really sweet space to sit with a church when they're going through such a pivotal moment like that, a vulnerable moment, and to be able to help them move to health on the other side of that.
Absolutely. All right, Tim, are you ready for our random segment?
Let's be random. Let's do it.
Okay. I know that you are passionate about certain brands, and I feel like I've observed this about you in the last, like, I don't know, 5 years of your life. Well, I feel like it's when you've been leading Smart full time and probably been
Okay.
traveling a lot. Like, I've noticed you are passionate about, like, this is my favorite brand for this, and this is my favorite brand for this.
Yes.
I'd love for us to share what are our favorite, like, luggage or like bag, travel
Oh.
utility brands. Because I know you have one that you love that's your bag. So share that with everybody for our random segment today. And then I'll share mine.
Yeah, I am. I'm actually. I'm an Enneagram 5 wing 6. So the 6 side is a loyalist. And so if I find a brand, like right now, you didn't ask me about shirts, but I all my shirts are built, BYLT built. You didn't ask me that, but that's like I'm loyal to that brand, and that's why would I buy? Why would I even look at any other brands? I don't need
Mhm.
to.
Well, and
I'm
your
like,
5 is that you did all of the research to figure
oh
out
yeah,
what the very best was,
oh
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
your 6 is like, "Now we're gonna be loyal to it." Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. Yep. So for years, for decades, I carried a bag called eBags, ebags.com. They were bought by Samsonite, so they don't exist anymore. But I think Samsonite maybe still makes them. But they were great bags, and they lasted forever, like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of flights, and these things were indestructible. But I switched to Topo Designs. Topo is I think they're like an outdoors, naturist, camping kind of, which I don't do any of that stuff. But I love their bags. So I saw a friend with a backpack, and then they came out with a suitcase, like a carry on. And so they're super durable. They pack great. I don't check bags. It's all carry on. Oh, they pack great, and they've got a little bit of a design flair to them.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Is it your backpack too, or it's just your
Yeah.
luggage piece? Your backpack too. Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Because you've got like your suitcase kind of thing.
Yep.
And I'm saying kind of thing because it's not like a hard suitcase. It's kind of a
No.
soft, yeah,
Yep.
in your backpack. Yeah. Mine is my suitcase that I love is Away. And I know they were kind of like the trendy thing, I don't know, what, 10 years ago, maybe a little bit less than that. But that suitcase, I mean, it's got some scuffs on it, but I'm amazed. I mean, I don't even know. Definitely hundreds of flights at this point because I'm trying to remember. I think I got it pre-COVID and I just
Away
love
is the
it.
brand.
Yeah, Away is the brand.
Is it one
Mhm.
of those that has the tech built in with the battery or something?
You know what? It does, but I never use it.
Okay.
It's
You
so
like the
fun.
bag even without that.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, I love, it's got the 4 wheels, which, I don't know if she'll listen to this, but my sweet mother, so she has 2, like, when she comes and visits us, 2 little suitcases that they don't have 4 wheels, and I'm like, "Mom, like, how can you not have it?" It just blows my mind that people can have a suitcase without the 4 wheels these days.
Okay.
I
My bag
what?
doesn't have 4 wheels.
What? How do you do that?
You're talking like the spinners that like,
Yes.
yeah, so you can hold it upright. Yeah, that's the only downside to it. But I love the bag so much it doesn't matter.
Okay, that blows my mind because I can't imagine, like, carrying it behind me. I love that it's beside me, the spinners, I can easily navigate it, etcetera. And then my backpack is Low& and Sons, which is I don't know if they have I think it's, focused on females because I don't think it's mainly a purse company, and then they have some backpacks too. And, that thing has served me so well with, um over the years. I've had this one. It was a big investment for me at the time. And it's, of course, you like, for me, I like eyed this backpack because it was, it was expensive, more than I've ever spent on like a backpack before. And I eyed it forever and I finally pulled the trigger. And then you get it and you're like, this is so worth it because I'm like schlepping this thing around all over the place. I use it every single day. And you're like, of course this was worth the money because
Yeah.
it's like a piece of clothing that you wear all the time, So anyway.
Well, and when you travel like us, that matters. Like you want something
Mhm.
that's durable and something that's easy to find if you do have to check a bag and all of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, excuse me, sorry. That is our random segment of the day. That was a fun one. I knew you'd like that one because you love your brands.
It's good. Okay,
All right, buddy.
real quick
Yeah, go
question.
ahead.
I gave you my brand of shirts. Like, so what's one other brand, non-suitcase, non-travel related that you are in love with?
Man, I will say I feel like I'm grateful you asked me this question because I feel like I'm on a journey to figure this out for clothing for me because I feel like I've struggled to find like that piece of clothing or brand that I just can order because I know what size I am and all the thing. And I think that's harder for women than men, I will say.
Yeah.
Like it's easier for guys to be like, this is my shirt size and this is my pant size and let me just order 5 of them. But I do love they're the pants I'm wearing right now. They're a Viore, a certain jogger of the Viore, and I will say I'm bummed because they've stopped making this. So I have the ones I'm wearing now are like a dark charcoal gray, and then they have like an army green. So I have 2 pairs, but yeah, I wish I'm like, dang it. Because I'm
Yes.
loving these pants. I wear them all the time, and yeah, so
Uh,
Viore
I'm
joggers.
wearing Vuori pants right now too. So,
There we go. Shout out
yep.
to Viore. Viore, would you like to sponsor our Leading Smart podcast?
Hey, yeah. Bring it on.
That'd be amazing. All right, Tim. Well, everybody, go to leadingsmart.com. If you are not currently receiving our weekly emails, we highly recommend you get on those. Not only do you get alerts of when our podcasts drop every single week and kind of a recap of what's in the podcast, but you also get the links to, we've got a webinar coming up in, I guess, a week after you'll hear this episode, all about staffing and structure. We let you know about our dates for our gatherings. So, anything and everything you need to know happens through email. So go to leadingsmart.com and sign up for that. Anything else, Tim?
Think that's it.
All
See
right.
y'all
We'll
next
see
week.
you next week.